Thanks, Craig. Look, I hope my voice lasts out this session. It was failing a bit last night, but anyway, fingers crossed. But thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come down here and just take you through the work we've been doing to date. I'm here with a colleague, Nathan. We both work for WSP in Sydney, and Nathan's got quite a bit of history in this area with work on slips and land instability throughout the valley and around Lithgow. So what I'll plan to do now is just take you through the options that we've been looking at over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, and take you as far as the 3 shortlisted options that we've got to, and the work we're now doing on those options to try and resolve what we think is a preferred option to take forward into design.
Yep.
Not moving.
Right.
Manually.
It's not actually. You've got to roll it.
Okay. Okay.
I'll be manning it.
Yep. I don't even have a screen. Oh. Okay. Yeah, just so I can see. So we're just going to run through the previous work that we've done up to this stage. Look at some assumptions that we took forward into the design of the new road. For instance, things like cross section, what type of vehicle we wanted to design around. We'll go through the 9 main options we initially looked at, and then look at the 3 shortlisted options that we've reached so far. Then just look at the current status of the project, some of the key issues going forward, and then the next steps. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we quite early in the piece. We did some work on the Wolgan road stability. Around Christmas time, we looked at some of the constraints that were going to govern where the new road might go. We did a brief report to council on a preferred corridor, and we looked at things as far as looking at the old coach road, rail track, that was an option, and coming in from the north. And in the end, it was obvious that the preferred way was probably just to put another road down through the valley, close to where the existing road is. And in the main, that was driven by the fact that there's already an existing road up to that point, away from there. So we're looking at a much shorter section we need to replace. So now we've moved on to this report, which is looking at that particular corridor, which is the existing valley down from Wolgan's Gap, and looking at a preferred road alignment through that corridor. You're probably familiar with the picture on the right there. That's a section of the donkey steps, which is in use at the moment. So we looked at some of the criteria that we needed for a new road, and we were looking on the eastern side of the existing valley, as opposed to the existing road which is on the western side. And that's because there's better geotechnical opportunities on the right-hand side and on the eastern side. We wanted a road that was suitable to accommodate up to a single-unit truck within its own lane, but could accommodate a semi-trailer by using both lanes on some of the curves. In terms of grading, obviously a key issue. We were working with preferred grading of 10 to 15%, but eventually maximum of 17%. We want a road that's going to be resilient to weather conditions and minor rock spills that would obviously flow road that could be accommodated in the road design. And design that would facilitate maintenance in the future, so it would be easy to clean up any minor rock spills or do maintenance. And there was a preference, of course, to maintain the donkey steps track operational while the new road was being built. So that was where we would look at the typical section we built is shown just on the below there. We're looking at sort of 3.5 metre wide lanes, but narrowish 1 metre wide shots. And on the upper side, you'll see there's a 2 metre wide table drain there to collect runoff from down the hill. But that would also allow us as a catch pit to collect any minor rock spills down overnight. obviously through the life of the drone, you can guarantee that whenever he's getting miners or rock pools, that those sort of debris based on that, it's that relatively easily.
Just pause again. Microphone, but they will only hear through the microphone on the PCs. Turn that off. And you'll have to be PC, please. You'll have to be quite loudly. Right. I think try and project the audio here. Trinity will try and also manage the line here for the people at home. Let's see how we go. Can I just also Sorry, Greg. Okay, we'll start again. For the people at home, we've just turned off the microphone in the room here, and Mark will do his best to speak to this microphone. I hope that works. Can someone please indicate if it's working better? A moment or so. Yeah.
Much clearer.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Just keep going.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that
Well,
thumbs up.
let's move on
Thank
to
you.
the next slide. So I'm just going to run through now the 9 or so options that we initially came up with. Actually, that pointer.
Did you spell it?
Great.
Sorry, there we go.
Okay. So option 1, I apologise for the quality of our model. I'll just explain a little bit. This green track on here is the donkey stick track. There, you'll see a very faint brown line at the top of the slide. That's the existing road, which is closed at the moment. These yellow areas were provided by our geotechnical people, which indicate higher risk geotechnical areas that we should be aware of. And this grey line here is the option 1 alignment which we initially came up with. So you'll see there's relatively quick route, and this option was trying to follow as much as possible the gullies and the rivers of the existing road. The most challenging part is right at the top of the hill, on the left of your screen there, which is where we need to be near vertical escape down into the valley. And this option would have resulted in quite large cuttings in that area, which have obliterated most of the natural rock formations that are around there. And for that matter, for that reason, we didn't favour this too much, just on the basis of the quite visually a problem, with impact on the existing rock formation. The length of the route is around about 0.6 kilometres, and we were aiming at that route length only because that gives average grade of about 2% across the whole of the road. The lower part of the road has a flatter grade from about here to about 6%, and the upper reach is typically around 15% around most. And you'll see that most of these options do involve reasonably tight hairpin bends. There's usually a couple of them here where we've pushed the road back in an attempt to increase the length of the road to get that grade down to a reasonable level. So as I said, we sort of took this option because of the impact it had at the top of the valley on the rock cliffs, and we went to option 2. Click on 1, 2.
Sorry, just have to find the mouse again. Oh.
So go ahead. Option 2, similar alignment once again on the eastern side of the valley. Option 2, the main difference is near the top of the valley, it incorporates a fairly long bridge. And that bridge means we don't have to do any cuttings into that existing rock outcrop. It allows us to bypass those and stay clear of them until it lands just clear of the steepest part of the cliff faces. So after that, you see once again we've got 2 fairly tight hairpin bends. We switch back and some additional road length, and then wind our way down into the bottom of the valley. And we connect onto the existing road on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll probably just see towards the right edge of the screen. Option 2 we thought was worth considering further, so we have shortlisted that option. Take it further. And if you weren't able to hear me earlier when I was speaking with the other ones, the green line you see on the slide here is the donkey stick track, which is operational at the moment, and the thin brown line at the top of the sheet there is the existing road, which is currently closed. The yellow sections are just sections of geotechnical higher hazard risk areas. So that's option 2. Option 3. Trying to do three things at the moment. There we are. Oh, you have it there.
Yeah.
So option 3, very similar to option 2. It shares the same lower section as option 2, but in option 3, we start on the western side of the donkey step track rather than the eastern side. So you notice at the top of the valley, this road comes in on the left of the donkey steps rather than on the right side. But once again, it bridges across the worst part of the valley there and avoids impacting on those cliffs, and runs back down again using a turn back here to be able to get that additional length and keep the grade down. The lower section of that option is the same design as in option 2. So option 3 represented coming in from one side of the donkey steps, option 2 the other. We thought both of those had some merit and were worth looking at in further detail. Option 4, the one on the screen now. Option 4 is a very sort of minimal standard option we looked at, where we looked at cutting back our standards to very narrow lanes, very tight curvature, and it was really just to see what a road might look like if we trimmed it right back to bare bones sort of design standards. And we didn't take that any further because it actually meets some of those minimum standards that we set. But it was there just as a comparison. Option 5 is an interesting option. It starts at the top of the hill. It starts further back, actually, at the top of the hill, and enters quite a deep cutting. So by the time it drops into the valley proper, the road is already about 50 meters below existing ground level. And that means that by the time we bridge across that part of the valley to drop onto the other western side of the valley, sorry, the eastern side of the valley, we're already down on the lower slopes with flatter slopes. And by being able to be on those flatter slopes, we don't have to have such tight curvature on the tracks here. They're a little bit more comfortable, so there's a bit of road alignment through there and probably a bit of driver experience. And once again, it joins onto that original design in the lower section. A couple of things with this option, because the cutting is quite wide at the top of the hill there, the existing road, if that was to be kept open to the lookout, it would just need to be diverted very slightly around the top of the cutting. And the access to the property here would need to be diverted slightly, the edge of the cutting as well. We'd also need to find a way just to manage the donkey track, because as you can see, it's severed by the main cut. And so we'd probably have to be reinstated along the edge of the cutting, or a piece of material cutting left in here to keep that track open and removed it as a final operation. But this option represented a slightly different view. It was lower down, some benefits of it being a flatter slope further down. So we thought that was that merited taking forward and looking at it in a bit more detail as well.
Having some issues with the voice, the sound at home.
Click on the speaker, please. Turn it in, yeah. It says crest on display. Okay. Next. The level is full. The level is full. Yeah, 100. It goes up to 100. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I can turn the camera, get it to talk right.
Whoever was talking just now was quite audible.
Definitely going through the flood. It's going through the flood. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. Where's the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, just down there. Okay. Is that any better for those of you?
It is now, but we missed everything that you've said so far.
Yeah, you
Everything.
could probably start again because we haven't heard a thing.
I mean, all we can see is the maps and scrambled voices behind it.
Provide the report.
Okay, yeah, apologise if you might have some problems hearing me in the seat
So
set.
you just need to direct your voice at that moment.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll just go over option 5 again, which is on the screen, in case you didn't hear that. Are you able to hear me right now?
We can, but we didn't hear you over the earlier slides, so we've got no idea where we were and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
People at home, but what we're doing is we're going through what will be 9 slides. I apologise that you haven't heard the narrative for the first 4, but we're going to keep going, and we come back soon to 3 out of the 9, and it will become self-explanatory. I don't believe it's fatal that you haven't heard that earlier piece. I apologise again.
I'll just run through option 5 again, in the hope that you can at least hear this one. And as Craig said, we will look at the 3 shortlisted options fairly soon. So option 5, it starts at the top of the hill with a deep cutting, which you won't be able to see my pointer on screen, but that deep cutting gets us down to about 50 metres below ground level by the time we enter the steeper part of the valley. And being much lower at the top means that we can land on the lower slopes further down after we get off the bridge. So those lower slopes being flatter allow us to have much wider and larger radius curves for the switchback section at the bottom, which makes the road a lot more drivable and a bit more easier to use by people. So option 5 we think has some merit, and so that's the 3rd option we look forward. This is going to move, is it? Yeah, it was working before.
Yeah,
Or do I just arrow down here? Arrow down's not working either. There we are. Yep, 6 and 6A. Yeah, so these 2 options we just looked at quickly to see what a long bridge might look like. So starting from the top of the valley, we would look at bridging most of the way down to the bottom and land on the eastern or the western side of the valley, just on the lower slopes. So that was option 6 with a reasonably long bridge, and 6A had an even longer bridge. Now, we didn't take these options any further, and the reason for that was those long bridges are very costly. Some of the pier heights would end up being 80 or 90 meters high, with almost record-breaking pier heights. So a long bridge option was there really just to test the scenario, and it really wasn't going to be a viable option. So we didn't take those options forward. Option 7 looks a bit like spaghetti. So with option 7, what we tried to do was keep the maximum grade on the road down to something like 6 or 7%. And to do that, we obviously had to make the road a lot longer. So we put numerous switchbacks into the road. Oops, and by that way, we were able to get the grade down a lot lower. But in doing that, we've just made the road a lot more difficult to drive. So there's now about 6 or 7 switchbacks, and they're all tight radii. And it would take quite a long time to traverse that road, even though it would be a flatter grade and probably would suit you if you wanted to ride your bicycle up there, but not so much if you wanted to drive. So, yeah. So option 6 really fell away and wasn't worth taking any further. Option 7, I apologise. Option 8, we were asked just to look at the existing donkey steps track. So we just mapped out the donkey steps track and we put some geometry onto that just to see how steep it was. The upper reaches of that track are about 35% grade, in the section that's concreted, and elsewhere it's around 20 to 25%. So in its unchanged form, it's not suitable for any heavy vehicles. It's not even suitable really for normal two-wheel drive vehicles. So that was really just to look at what the existing features were of the donkey steps track. We looked at option, goodness me, going the wrong way again. Option 8A, which was, here we are, sorry about that. Option 8A had some improvements to the donkey steps track in the upper reaches, and that was an attempt to try and flatten the grades. But the best we could do there was to get the grades down to around 25%. And there'd be a lot of work required to widen the road to at least a minimum, excuse me, at least a minimum standard that would get two vehicles to go past each other. So we didn't take that option any further. We did a brief report to the council just on option 8A and improved donkey steps, and we parked that for the time being. Now, thanks. Oh, there should be one more. Option 9. Option 9's in some ways similar to option 2 and 3, and at the top of the valley, it eventually goes into the valley pretty much close on top of the donkey steps track. So rather than option 3, which is on the western side of the donkey steps, option 2 is on the eastern side. This one sort of ran through the middle. And other than that, it was very similar to options 2 and 3. When we stacked that up against options 2 and 3, it didn't offer any improvements, and in some ways it had effects on the donkey steps track which would need to be realigned during construction. So we thought we don't need to take that one further for any more scrutiny. We'll just rely on option 2 and 3 to represent that type of option. So the summary of the options, then just looking at the screen now. So option 1, that was the option that cut into the rock outcrops at the top, and we didn't like that from a visual outcome point of view, the damage it would do to the scenery there. Option 2 used a bridge. It was on the eastern side of the donkey steps, and it bridged over that steep terrain at the top of the hill. That was worth looking at in more detail. Option 3 is very similar to 2, but starts on the western side of the donkey steps, and once again bridges over that steep terrain. Option 4 was that minimum standard option, which we parked because it didn't really meet the minimum design standards we wanted. Option 5, if you remember, had the deep cutting at the top of the hill, which allowed us to get down lower sooner and traverse the flatter slopes on the bottom of the valley. Option 6 and 6A were the 2 long bridge options, which were discounted because of the cost, and they used part of the existing western side of the valley, which we currently have closed. Option 7 was the one that had the multiple 6 or 7 zigzags in it to be able to adopt a flatter grade, and that one we parked simply because it was less drivable and a longer route, and would be more costly than the other options because it's a longer length of road. Option 8A were the 2 donkey steps routes as is and with some improvement, but we weren't able to get those to meet the minimum standards needed for the type of vehicles that would use it or to be a safe, practical route for the long term. Option 9, as I mentioned just before, was similar to option 2 and 3, but we didn't take it forward because it didn't have any benefits on that and had impacts on the donkey steps while it was being built. So option 2, option 3, and option 5 we had shortlisted to take forward and look at in a little bit more detail. So I'll just go through those now. So option 2 in a little bit more detail now. You can see on the left of the screen, it diverts off the existing road, just at the top here. I don't think my pointer's working anymore. Oh, the existing road would be connected into the new road, so you could still get access up to the lookout there. The donkey steps track here is shown in yellow, so you can see option 2 starts on the eastern side of the donkey steps, runs into a cutting before a bridge across the main part of the valley there, and then we have those 2 switchbacks down here to get us down, increase the length and get us down into the lower part of the valley. And it continues on the second slide below on flatter grades, getting down to about 6%. We have another bridge here where we cross the stream, the watercourse that's in the bottom of the valley.
and probably that could well be an arch, concrete arch instead of a bridge as a simpler type of structure. It runs down and joins onto the existing road at the northern end here, and there'd be an intersection there once again where we could connect in to the existing road and at least leave part of that open for traffic. So that's option 2. Option 3, we also worked up into a bit more detail. And once again, option 3 comes out similar to option 2, connects to the existing road to allow access to the lookout. But it starts on the western side of the Donkey Steps track, once again bridging over the Donkey Steps and landing on the eastern side of the valley. Follows a very similar route to option 2 with 2 switchbacks here and down to the flatter ground, and then almost an identical alignment at the bottom on that lower slide to get back onto the existing road. Next one, option 5. So the main feature of option 5 you'll see on the top slide on the left-hand side is a deep cutting that starts much further back than option 2 and option 3. And so at the point where that reaches the edge of the valley, at the end of the cutting, we're down about 50 meters below the existing ground in that area, which allows, by the time we bridge across the valley and land back on the eastern side here, we're down in the lower slopes of the valley. And those lower slopes being much flatter, as I mentioned, allow us to have much easier curves and a much less of a switchback to get us down that extra distance, because we've already lost 50 meters of height by that cutting at the top. So we see that one as having some merit. Once again, the lower part is essentially the same as option 2 and option 3, so a very similar alignment with an intersection at the top and an intersection at the bottom. At the top, on the top slide, you'll see that the cutting actually cuts into the existing road to the lookout, so that would need to be just diverted around the top edge of the cutting or accommodated on a bench within the cutting to be able to keep that road open. And the property at the top of the valley would also need to have their access point just diverted across from the cutting so they can maintain access to their property. It does cut through, you'll notice that it cuts through the Donkey Steps track. So we need to find a way of keeping that open in the meantime, either by benching it into that cut, so allowing vehicles to run up the side of the cutting on an angled slope and then get onto the Donkey Steps, or we leave an amount of earth fill in there in the short term during construction to allow that to remain open and then take that out right at the end. We can work through those sort of logistics if this option turns out to be a preferred option. So that's the 3 shortlisted options in a little bit more detail. The current status of the project is we've issued a draft report to council. It's about 95% complete. And we've issued drawings to allow some feedback from council. There's ongoing studies at the moment into the impacts on ecology. So our staff have been out there just to do a walkover of the site to look at the flora and fauna in the area so that we can assess the impacts on those. And we're having the 3 options, the 3 shortlisted options are being costed by a cost estimator at the moment just to see what sort of order of money. And obviously cost comes into the equation as well when we start looking at which would be the preferred option. So I think that the key issues we have at the moment looking forward are obviously delivery timeframes to be able to get this road designed and constructed, and the planning approvals all in place. We need to look at how to obtain funding for the construction, look at the whole planning approvals process and what type of what pathway that needs to go through, and look at construction procurement and whether that can be started early or needs to be put off till later in the process. And on to the last one. So just on the next steps now. So looking forward, we need to incorporate the feedback from council and stakeholders on the draft report and then issue a final report. We'll undertake an HSID risk workshop on the 3 options and feed that into the options assessment as well. Complete the remaining study tasks and feed those into the final reports. Engage with planning and with stakeholders on the approvals required. Engage with the funding authorities, as I mentioned earlier, and then look at any refinement we might need to do to the preferred option. Obviously, there's some value engineering that can be taken into those options. They were done at a very high level of design to get some basic comparisons done. And so there's obviously a lot of refinement in terms of shortening bridges, reducing the amount of retaining wall in there, and seeing if we can get a better cut fill balance, and looking at how we deal with all those other things like access and other road diversions. So I think that's my talk at an end.